Well, welcome back to the Transfer Show. We've had a very interesting show. It kicked off with some amazing news of a potential big swap deal involving Richarlison potentially going to Crystal Palace, Eze going to Spurs. We were always going to talk Arsenal right now, and what is fascinating is that we now have an update on the Eberechi Eze situation, and it concerns Arsenal.
Yeah, so
there was an idea floated by the club, we will give you a new contract. Let's talk about this. Yeah. When Paul Mitchell came in as sporting director last summer, he said, actually, no. You've got 4 years left on your contract. I don't believe right now it's in the best interests of Newcastle United to offer you a new contract. So therefore, I'm going to withdraw that. And I think that is the foundation for a lot of the frustration and hurt that Alexander Isak and his people feel with regards to that negotiation that started and then was halted rather abruptly. And I think that has been lingering for the last 12 months. Eddie Howe has played a blinder as far as I'm concerned. He's got the side focused and ready for a brand new Premier League season. They've added 4 exceptional players. And he's made it quite clear publicly as well that, Alex, we want you in our squad. I want you to play for Newcastle United. I want you to be a part of things moving forward, but it has to be on our terms. Newcastle United is bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us put together. And therefore, the values of this football club are crucial for us when you talk about potentially wanting to leave or not being happy or agitating for a move or putting stuff on social media. The football club always comes first and the fans come first. And that's vitally important. And I think the way Eddie Howe has played it has been absolutely perfect in the most difficult and challenging of circumstances. Does he want to be in a position where his leading goal scorer, his main man, the man that's going to fire them to silverware and Champions League glory, is not even in the squad training?
He said he still wants him.
Of course. Eddie Howe wants him. The players will want him. They may be frustrated. There may be some of them that are frustrated, but ultimately they will understand his position and what he wants. And I think that this is where it becomes a real challenge now, because you've got the fans that are clearly not on side. But I think all of this can quietly go into the background if he is still there on September the 2nd, which I believe he will be, and they can start to focus on moving that team forward.
OK, from what we're hearing, from what we're reading, from what we're hearing from both of you guys, the replacements are going to be key here, aren't they? Right. So where are Newcastle with any potential replacements right now?
Right. So picking up on what we've talked about Wissa, but yeah. When you're saying replacements,
but they need more than Wissa, don't they?
Well, when you're talking replacements, you're talking replacements potentially for Alexander Isak. We think that the Wissa deal, if it does go through, despite the craziness we're hearing about this one tonight, he would actually be a replacement for Callum Wilson, who left Newcastle United at the end of his contract and is now at West Ham United. But how do you end up replacing somebody like Alexander Isak, which is why this is dragging on and on and on until the end of the transfer window? Because as we said, the two big elements in this, they need replacements and they need the fee that they believe Alexander Isak is worth to be met. So the irony of this is that Newcastle United went for Hugo Ekitike. He ended up going to Liverpool. And in ending up going to Liverpool, Liverpool actually made it more difficult in a way for them to get Alexander Isak, because he could have been a potential, well, they wanted him to play alongside Isak, but he could have been a potential replacement for Alexander Isak. They also went for Benjamin Sesko. Now, you can't blame Newcastle United for how they approached that one. They really went for it. Their actual initial outlay, what they were willing to pay RB Leipzig, was higher than what Manchester United were prepared to pay. This wasn't about Benjamin Sesko snubbing Newcastle United. This was about Benjamin Sesko choosing Manchester United. He had his heart set on going to that club. And Manchester United were only going to come in for him once they got the encouragement from the players' camp that he wanted to come. Newcastle United did nothing wrong there. It was just one of those things. So who's left? There's talk of Ollie Watkins, but then if Aston Villa were even to decide to go into the market to sell Ollie Watkins, they would need to bring in a replacement. Now, we're hearing this evening that we're talking about dominoes, it's all happening at the moment, that they are exploring the conditions of a deal for the Chelsea striker, Nicholas Jackson. That would make sense because Nicholas Jackson made his Villarreal debut. No, maybe not made his debut, but he played under Unai Emery when he was at Villarreal. How they would try and do a deal for Nicholas Jackson, because we know that Chelsea would want upwards of 60, 70, 80 million pounds for him. And Aston Villa, we know they can't go that big on any striker unless maybe somebody left. So is the Ollie Watkins potential deal going to rear its head again? The other one, of course, I've mentioned Nicholas Jackson. Newcastle United have also kept an eye on Nicholas Jackson as well. That would be an easier deal to do than the other ones, because we know that Chelsea are willing to sell and that Nicholas Jackson is looking to explore all of his options. So it is much more easier said than done. And the problem there is Newcastle United will look at all of the potential availability of these strikers. Can they do the job that Alexander Isak can do?
Well, not many
Big
can.
question.
Might need two of them, that's the issue.
Yeah.
Almost irreplaceable. He's almost irreplaceable. And the players that Newcastle felt like could potentially be good enough to replace him have all gone to other clubs, and that makes it a real challenge. The one thing I'd like to finish on with the Newcastle scenarios, I actually think they've had an exceptional window. I actually think if you take away the noise around Alexander Isak and the fact they've missed out on a couple of players, they have done brilliant business. No chief exec, no sporting director. Andy Howe has stepped up to the plate. They've improved the goalkeeping department with the signing of Aaron Ramsdale. They've got Jacob Ramsey in as a replacement for Longstaff, 30-year-old for a 24-year-old, someone that can play wide left and a left eight. You've got Anthony Elanga, who's come in for Miguel Almiron, who brings Premier League experience. His assist last season was sensational, and pace to burn and energy and enthusiasm for that side. And when you look at those players, as well as Malik Thiaw, one of the best defenders at AC Milan, one of the best defenders in Serie A, they've actually had an exceptional window where they've signed really good quality players that have improved their starting 11.
So is the Isak situation completely overshadowed?
I think so. I think people are talking about one player only who wants out of the football club when you've got all of these other players that are desperate to go and play. Darmish mentioned it. Yoane Wissa has his heart set on playing for Newcastle United. That may or may not transpire to happen. However, he wants to go and play for Eddie Howe. There are players that want to be up in the northeast because of the type of football they play, how exciting they are to watch, the fact they've got Champions League football, the fact that the fan base is so passionate about their football club and their players. And I think all of the noise around Isak has left people forgetting all of the good work that they've done throughout the course of this summer. And that will be a real frustration for Eddie Howe. But I think give it a couple of weeks' time and the transfer window slams shut and the players that are there and they get the season going, eventually they'll all realise that actually the most important thing is Newcastle United. This is a football club with ambitious owners that have invested heavily. This is a destination football club, not a stepping stone. They have spent huge sums of money on the training ground, on the team, and trying to create a side that can compete. And they've done that. Last 12 months, silverware in the cabinet, Champions League football 2 of the last 3 years. This is an exciting time to come to this football club. And the owners will be saying, talk about how great we are, not about someone who wants to leave.
Yeah, strong start, fellas. Well done. Darmish's phone's ringing. I think he's got some news on some dominoes, which is going to be that's going to be the word of the rest of the window.
It's Hawaiian special.
No, I was just
Hawaiian special.
I've got to go see the folks on the way home. They just wanted some milk.
All right. He's also got some interesting news coming up after the break. Next up, developments on Rasmus Højlund as an injury seemingly opens up a big opportunity. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. It's already been a busy show, busy start. We were talking before the break about a few forwards that could be on the move. Could that be the case at Manchester United? We know that they need to sell. Darmish, Rasmus Højlund, let's start with him. Is he any closer to getting a move away from Man U?
Not yet, but look, we know AC Milan were interested. They wanted to do a loan with an option. It's understood now that AC Milan couldn't convince Manchester United forward Rasmus Højlund to join on those current terms because Manchester United and Højlund, in an ideal scenario, wanted a permanent deal. Now, this may sound like I'm about to contradict myself because of what I'm about to say. Milan, meanwhile, are now trying to close a deal for the Bayer Leverkusen striker Victor Boniface. RB Leipzig, they have been tracking Rasmus Højlund throughout this transfer window. They have been speaking to Manchester United about a permanent deal. And if a deal can be agreed in the last 12 days with Manchester United, then it will be up to Rasmus Højlund to decide whether he wants to go. Now, here comes the contradictory bit. Because Sky in Italy are now reporting that Napoli are now pushing really hard to try and do a deal for Rasmus Højlund, and it would be a loan with an option to buy. So not a permanent deal again. However, we think that Højlund might be more open to that particular deal than the AC Milan offer because Napoli can offer Champions League football, which AC Milan cannot offer at the moment. Clearly, this will be by the by at the moment because it would have to be cleared by Manchester United, any kind of deal that Napoli would propose, be it a loan with an option, because we do know that United's preference is to do a permanent deal. They want around £40 million for him. Or if it is to be a loan, they would want some sort of permanent element attached to that deal. Initially, Rasmus Højlund wanted to fight for his place, but he was left out of the squad completely for that defeat on Sunday against Arsenal at Old Trafford. Head coach Ruben Amorim hasn't completely closed the door on Rasmus Højlund staying, but he has said that he shares the same characteristics as the new striker, Benjamin Sesko, and it is clear, given how the squad has been picked in the first game of the season, that Rasmus Højlund is going to find his game time limited. Definitely one to keep an eye on in the last 12 days, but it looks like now Napoli are pushing. They've got Romelu Lukaku, remember, who is injured. They don't know how long yet, but they think
so that could be a key thing here.
It could be. It could be months rather than weeks at the moment, which would again imply what would happen if Rasmus Højlund went and then Lukaku gets fit. Is Rasmus Højlund going to be back up to Romelu Lukaku? Potentially, yes. But if he goes there, plays really, really well, then Antonio Conte might have a decision to make on his selection.
OK, interesting. We've got our eyes on that. Højlund, one of the players that they'd like to move on if possible. Garnacho is definitely in that camp as well.
Yeah, a player that's been muted about leaving Old Trafford over the course of this summer, but as of yet there's been no firm offer to Manchester United. We know that Chelsea have been in dialogue with Manchester United throughout the course of this summer. It's a little bit of a poker match, really, who blinks first, because we know that Manchester United will value Alejandro Garnacho at around £50 million, and they're probably right to say that, because you look at the players that have moved in those kind of positions. Anthony Elanga, around £50 million. We know that João Pedro, around £50 million. There are multiple players that are all in that kind of remit, so that's where their price tag comes from. However, Chelsea would rather pay around £25-30 million. They want to, sniff out a deal here, and they believe the longer they leave it over the course of this summer, the greater chance they're going to be able to get the price they want, because they know that Manchester United need to sell as well because of the number of outgoings. Alejandro Garnacho has made it quite clear he has one preference and one preference only, and that's to join Chelsea and move to London. That's what his desire is. If you're asking me and putting me on the spot, I'd probably say Garnacho to Chelsea is probably a deal that happens. However, Chelsea have to be really careful about what they spend this summer, because they have this UEFA business plan, this agreement, that their player purchases do not exceed their player sales. They need to sell more than they spend, and that's where they're caught in a situation. Probably expect this one to rumble right to the wire.
Right, OK.
If you look behind us, there's one other player that we are going to talk about who is in the news as well with regard to departures. It is, of course, Jadon Sancho. Roma, they haven't given up on striking a deal for Jadon Sancho yet. Their head coach, Gianpiero Gasperini, he absolutely loves Jadon Sancho. He is the key driver of this deal. They made an offer worth £20 million, did Roma, to Manchester United, which I think United will probably agree to in principle. Then it was down to Jadon Sancho himself. However, as it stands, we think Sancho wants to explore other options in the final 12 days. Besiktas and Borussia Dortmund are among a number of clubs who are interested in Jadon Sancho. Besiktas managed by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but we don't think at the moment that Jadon Sancho wants to go to Turkey. But if we get to the end of this transfer window and he's still a Manchester United player, the Turkish window is actually open for another 11 days. So you'll be sitting here again for another 11 days, maybe talking about Jadon Sancho. Yeah, but again, another one to keep an eye on, a Jadon Sancho situation.
Gut feeling of those three players, Højlund, Sancho, Garnacho, who leaves first?
Who leaves first?
Yep.
There's only 12 days left, mate.
Who's the closest of those three to leaving Manchester United, do you think?
The one that looks the most likely, but not necessarily going to leave first, is Garnacho,
right,
as Mark mentioned there. Rasmus Højlund as well. I think they all will actually get a move before the end of this transfer window.
Yeah, you see that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with Jadon Sancho 1 year left, we know that Manchester United want rid of him. The Højlund stuff, it feels like it's just a case of where does he go? Leipzig, Napoli, unlikely to be Milan, and Garnacho, Chelsea. It's a marriage made in heaven. It just needs to happen.
Yeah, and they might need to sell a player or two first as well. Right, let's get on to Nottingham Forest, because they've had a really busy last few days, which is exactly what the manager was asking for, wasn't he? Before we get onto the overall business they've done, Douglas Luiz, deal agreed. How close is that to being a proper Nottingham Forest player? Yeah, just a matter of time now. We know that Juventus and Nottingham Forest have reached an agreement for that man. It's actually initially a deal for a loan that will have an option attached based on the number of appearances he makes in the Premier League. Just 19 games in Serie A last season for the 27-year-old who was so successful at Aston Villa. A real fan's favourite there. They didn't want to sell him. When they got rid of him, he went over to
Italy. Didn't work out, and now he's heading back to the Premier League. So that is a key signing for Nuno, someone he desperately wanted, and they really wanted to strengthen through midfield as well because of the way they play, and he will shield that back four perfectly. Another name to keep your eye on with regards to Nottingham Forest, Jose Angel Carmona. We know that there are talks happening between Nottingham Forest and Sevilla for the right back. 21-year-old, former Spanish international. That's an area of concern for Nuno. They want to add another right back. He's the one. There has also been a little bit of an interest in Matty Cash, but I'd imagine Jose Angel Carmona being the one that they get this summer. Very
quickly, Mark, because we're running out of time, but I said there Nuno was desperate not long ago for signings, but can he complain now? Has he got pretty much what he would have wanted? When you look at what they've signed over the last few days, they've been very active, haven't they?
I think every manager would complain. I think every single manager always wants one more, always wants to squeeze the chairman for a little bit more money. And when you look at the signings they've made over the course of this summer, there's some exceptionally gifted, talented players in there, and you can see the spending over £130 million. So once again, Evangelos Marinakis backing the manager, backing Ross Wilson and Edu, who's obviously come into the football club. He's got that connection with a number of South American and Brazilian players. So clearly that's the direction of travel. They've bought incredibly well. They've sold well as well. European football, great time to be a Forest fan. And I think Nuno may, just maybe, be a little bit happier today than he was this time last week.
Oh, and it was all looking different as well, with Morgan Gibbs-White possibly off to Spurs, Elanga sold, and all of that. Yes, Forest have done well, 136.5 million and counting. Right. Stay with us. Something very interesting coming up. The curious case of Marseille's Adrien Rabiot and Jonathan Rowe up for sale after one game of the season for misbehaviour. These two never do that. More on that next. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. We're going to get through a couple of clubs and just see what's going on in terms of news lately. We'll start with Man City. Darmesh, a bit of news regarding two of their defenders.
Yeah, today. Interesting news, actually, because Galatasaray are interested in Manuel Akanji from Manchester City. Nothing further at this stage, but there's an expectation that they're going to try and pursue that deal. And City are also in talks with their defender, Rico Lewis, over a new contract. Now, there was talk that Nottingham Forest were really, really interested in signing Rico Lewis earlier on in this transfer window. Looks like he's going to stay long-term now at Manchester City. And quite a telling sign over the weekend when Manchester City went to Molineux and beat Wolves by 4-0. No sign of Manuel Akanji in the squad at all. Rico Lewis started that game.
Played very well as well. Lovely assist, wasn't there, to get them up and running. How about Everton, Mark? We heard from David Moyes on Monday Night Football that he wants a few more signings. So we're expecting Everton to be one of the busiest clubs in the last 12 days.
David Moyes will be certainly hoping that they're much busier between now and the end of the window. He wants to add a lot of strength and depth to their squad at the moment. The one key position that he is looking at is as a wide player. They want to try and sign a winger. We know that there is interest in Tyler Dibbling. They've had a number of rejected offers by Southampton, who valued a player at upwards of £45 million. To Everton go back in. A couple of other players that they're interested in, Lyon's Malik Fofana and Leicester's Abdul Fatawu. A couple of players that they do like, but the key positions they're looking at, striker, right back, 6, on top of a winger as well. We know that they like Hayden Hackney in the Championship at the moment. And one of the right-back targets has been Ainsley Maitland-Niles, former Arsenal man, currently out in Ligue 1. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. They have to be creative and clever financially as well. That's the one thing. So there may be a couple of purchases and then a few loans with options.
Yeah, well, Jacob Bryan played right back, did he? And James Garner left back on Monday, so they didn't have two
shuffling the pack and
didn't have proper fullbacks, did they? Right, how about Fulham? Fulham have been interesting, haven't they? Because they've been pretty inactive. I think they've only signed a backup goalkeeper so far. Are we expecting that to change, incomings and outgoings in the next few days?
Yeah, I mean, they're still trying to pursue a deal for Reece Nelson at Arsenal, but also Rodrigo Muniz is now expected to stay at Fulham for the time being after they've rejected all bids and approaches from Atalanta. He's got a year left on his contract with the option of a further year, and I think now that Fulham will try and resume and continue talks over a new deal for the player. He was on the bench on the first game of the season at Brighton on Saturday. He came off the bench in that game and he scored a stoppage time equaliser to get Fulham a point. And you're talking about other incomings. Well, they are back in talks, we're told, of Fulham with Shakhtar Donetsk over the signing of the Brazilian forward Kevin. A gap in valuation still exists there, but discussions are ongoing over the price and the structure. And I think Fulham appear to be quite encouraged by the desire of the player to want to come to Craven Cottage, so one to watch there.
Yeah, I think a lot of Fulham fans want to see some fresh blood. Their team looked very similar to last year's starting 11 anyway on the weekend. Now, there was drama in Ligue 1 at the weekend when Marseille midfielders Adrien Rabiot and Jonathan Rowe were involved in a spat after their game with Rennes. The row has led to both players being transfer listed by Roberto De Zerbi.
This massive fight, and that was a proper fight between Rabiot and Rowe after the defeat at Rennes on Friday night, so opening game of the Ligue 1 season. Marseille played for an hour with 11 men against 10 away at Rennes, somehow managed to lose the game in the last kick of the game, pretty much. They go back to the dressing room. Geronimo Rulli, the goalkeeper, is very, very angry. He shouts at everybody, but especially at Jonathan Rowe. They have a bit of argy-bargy. I love this word of argy-bargy. It's one of my favorite words in English language. Argy-bargy. Rabiot steps in to separate Rulli and Rowe, then ends up having a fight himself with Jonathan Rowe. Then Rowe leaves the dressing room, comes back, they have another fight. And then we think it's pretty much over. This could be tension boiling up like we see in a lot of dressing rooms, especially after a defeat. On Monday, the two players are expelled from the first squad, Rowe and Rabiot, and we think, okay, they will pay a fine, they will be back. There's a big game on Saturday against Paris FC, the first home game of the season. And actually, no, Tuesday afternoon, we were told, and then it was confirmed by a club statement, that both of them were placed on the transfer list. For Jonathan Rowe, we know that he was already, Marseille were looking at options to let him go, to get some money in, and to then reinvest in signing other players. For Rabiot, this is very, very strange, because not that long ago, everybody at the club, from Roberto De Zerbi, the manager, to Pablo Longoria, the president, was saying how amazing Rabiot was, the best player in the squad, the best human being that they've ever seen. I mean, Longoria came out in a documentary not that long ago saying that I've never ever worked with somebody as good as Adrien Rabiot in my whole career. So from this to we don't want you in this club anymore, I don't know if it's justified, but there's a lot of people who think that actually Rabiot, with 1 year left on his contract, highest earner at the club, that Marseille actually took this fight as an excuse to try to find him a club and let him go and again reinvest the money that they would get in his transfer fee.
Extraordinary story that. Now, coming up, Chelsea are close to another player sale for profit. Could that open the door for more signings? Welcome back to the Transfer Show. We've had a very interesting show. It kicked off with some amazing news of a potential big swap deal involving Richarlison potentially going to Crystal Palace, Eze going to Spurs. We were always going to talk Arsenal right now, and what is fascinating is that we now have an update on the Eberechi Eze situation, and it concerns Arsenal.
Yeah, so credit to David Ornstein. He's just broken this, and it's just been confirmed to me just now that Arsenal are now considering a move for Eberechi Eze. Now, let me take you through a bit of a timetable that has happened throughout this summer's transfer window. We knew at the start of this window that Eberechi Eze was a player that Arsenal were looking at and that they were keen on and that they admired. And there's been a long time standing interest in Eberechi Eze. Then I was told it was going to go quiet for a little while, and that's because of a various amount of reasons. Number one, Arsenal had a number of other priorities to fill in their squad and in their first team, which they did. And they've had some window, haven't they? £200 million spent on 6 players. And there was a significant bit of contract news that they wanted to sort out as well with Ethan Nwaneri. Hence why it went a little bit quiet with Eberechi Eze. Now, we do know that Tottenham Hotspur wanted to do a deal for Eberechi Eze as well. They were wanting to put in a player into the mix because not only did Tottenham Hotspur want to bring in Eberechi Eze, they wanted to bring in Yoane Wissa. And to do that deal for Eberechi Eze and Wissa, they would have to free up a striker space in their squad. Hence why they tried to get the Richarlison deal involved as part of the deal to get Eze to Tottenham Hotspur and Richarlison to Crystal Palace, hence freeing up the space and then going for Brentford striker Yoane Wissa. Now, in the past 24 hours, it's starting to emerge that Kai Havertz might have suffered a serious-looking knee injury. We're still waiting to find out the extent of that injury. That, of course, is going to play a part in Arsenal going back into the market, but I think independently of that, the notion that they wanted to bring in Eberechi Eze throughout this transfer window really hasn't gone away internally. They wanted to keep it on the D-Lo, though, for understandable reasons, because they didn't want to show any of their cards. But now, with only 12 days to go, and with this injury that's suffered by Kai Havertz, they do want to act. They want to bring in Eberechi Eze. It is now going to depend upon whether they can strike a deal for Crystal Palace, because remember the release clause that Eberechi Eze had in his contract, £60 million plus £8 million in performance-related add-ons, that has expired. That expired the day before the season started. He is expected to play in their Europa Conference League playoff match tomorrow night. We've been seeing him training today, and he looks happy, to play for Crystal Palace still. However, we do know that throughout this transfer window, he has been open to a move to Arsenal. We've been saying as well that he's been open to a move to Tottenham Hotspur as well, but that's because a couple of weeks ago it had gone quiet with Arsenal and maybe they weren't going to pursue a deal for Eberechi Eze. But they've decided we do want to go for him, and there's clearly, they may be getting assurances as well, Arsenal, you would think, about the players that they want to sell, that there is growing interest in those players for them to be able to do this deal. I mentioned the release clause, so Crystal Palace can charge what they want now.
Could they equally not get them for less than that?
They could, but it all comes down to how PSR works as well. I know Mark is a big expert on this. If you look at the release clause, it could. We're not privy to the exact details of this release clause, apart from the figure, which we know is 60 plus 8. But it could depend on the conditions that release clause could be paid. So sometimes clubs might favour paying more than a release clause. People say, why?
Because you can spread it out.
In exchange for favourable payment terms. I'm not saying that Arsenal are going to pay more for Eberechi Eze than £68 million. They might even get him for less. But it will all depend on the structure of that deal. So at the moment, just to reiterate this breaking news, and it is big breaking news, we were hearing for the last 24 hours, Tottenham Hotspur in talks with Crystal Palace over a deal to sign Eberechi Eze. They wanted to include Richarlison in it to maybe free up a striker space to get Yoane Wissa. Richarlison wants to stay. Yoane Wissa wants to go to Newcastle United. Arsenal may have spotted an opportunity because it looks like now they are going full steam ahead to try and sign Eberechi Eze from Crystal Palace.
Wow, this is amazing, really, is amazing news. We were talking, obviously, the last few days on the transfer shows about, how he'd be perfect for Tottenham, Eze, because Maddison's out injured. He's a different player to Havertz. We don't know how long he's out injured for, but could he be the missing piece of the puzzle for Arsenal because he can play in different positions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he brings versatility, which is what all managers want. They want players that can play in multiple positions because there is a huge volume of games. Injuries are a big factor in matches these days, particularly with the pace and intensity that the Premier League has played at. It's not a hugely expensive deal for someone who's an England international and who offers so much. And you've seen, I think, over the course of the last 24 hours, you saw it with Gary Cottrell, the way he was joking with him on the training pitch, the way he was still signing fans' autographs and doing selfies and things. He is a player that gets it. He is a player that is very much with the people, down to earth. He'll offer so much, and you can see why big clubs like Spurs and Arsenal are interested in him, because it's not just what he can do on the pitch, but the characteristics and person he is off the pitch that is key.
Guys, great stuff. Good scrambling. That was a good, fun show, wasn't it?
Dharma spent more time on the phone than he did talking to us.
Talking to his mum and ordering his Hawaiian pizza.
Congratulations.
She's telling me about Eze, yeah.
Yeah, she's a link for Arsenal. Thank you, guys. Right, we have Good Morning Transfers back on tomorrow. That'll be on at 9 in the morning. Of course, you've also got Transfer Talk at midday. The Transfer Show will be back at 4 and 7 p.m. But next, we have more on big developments concerning Eberechi Eze. Arsenal considering making a move for him. Could be a battle of North London.